For sure. I just hit record, so. It's live. Caite Zeliff, welcome to the Ski Monster. Thank you for joining me. And I guess I'll start off by saying that the Proctor Academy Alumni Association is going to love this.
Yeah, I dig it. I can't believe how many of those Proctor kids I'm seeing out in the world. I ran into another one last night.
No way.
Yeah,
Ian. Shout out Ian.
Shout out, buddy. He's like, you probably don't remember me. And I was like, of course I do. It's funny to see everyone all grown up, though.
How old? Who's Ian?
He was my year.
Okay, yeah. I was a few years behind you. But,
yeah, quite old, quite wise.
That's a good way to look at it.
Trying.
Cool. How was the Warren Miller premiere?
It was awesome. Yeah, really fun to be around the hometown crowd because this year we did a little bit of filming at Cranmore in North Conway. So
oh, hell yeah.
It's fun to hear the crowd go wild when that comes up on screen.
Yeah. Were you part of that?
I was, yeah. It's kind of the story we are going for with our segment is kind of just talking about evolution within sport. And so they came back to New Hampshire and showed where I grew up ski racing, which is fun. And then we all met out in Alaska in the northern Chugach. So the segment kind of goes to my hometown and follows me. And then Aaron Blunk, his story, as well as Danny Davis. So
nice.
Kind of
that's a fun crew.
Oh, so much fun.
Yeah.
I'd never really spent time with Danny Davis, and he cracks me up. I've known Aaron for a couple years, but
nice. Yeah, Danny seems like the man.
He is
He's like
the
one of the
man.
few snowboarders. I mean, I just ski, so I don't consume as much snowboarding, but Danny Davis always gets me hyped.
Yeah.
Yeah, sick. I would have been at the Warren Miller premiere, but we had our 10th birthday party last night at Royale in Boston, and that was quite a party. But I'm bummed I missed the Warren Miller thing. I love going to premieres in town. I've done a lot of like hyping them up on this podcast, so I feel like a broken record, but they're so fun.
They are fun, and it's nice to like see the community out and about. I think so much of our content gets consumed on social media platforms that it's cool to have like a different space to show
and it's
some
like
content.
in-person community.
Yeah. I crave that more than I realize. And I think honestly, like for me, it's still like sometimes I forget, like I'm like, oh, I have to go to this movie premiere, it's stressful. Or like I have to like travel somewhere, whatever, first world problems. But then I get there and I'm reminded how much I enjoy it, you know?
Right.
Just being with people and kids too, like little girls, little ski racers that are just so fired up. And all the little ones, that's the cool thing about movie premieres is you see the impact, you know? You're like, oh, that did make a difference for me.
Yeah, you get to see like the live reaction.
Totally.
That's pretty dope.
Yeah, it's a good reminder.
For sure. Yeah. Cool. And then is that like mainly what brings you to town, or are you doing the ski expo this week?
Yeah.
Okay.
Warren Miller, the event with you guys, and then Snowbound this weekend. And I've been in North Conway, New Hampshire since July. So
oh yeah, you're
far.
local.
Local dog now. Yeah, I've been home hanging, so it was an easy trip.
Yeah.
It's nice to, you know, just post up in the city for a minute.
Yeah.
City life.
How long are you here? When are you? I assume you're heading back out west at some point, right?
Yeah, trying to figure that out. I'm healing from a concussion that has kind of been a bit of a beast to sift through symptom-wise and recovery-wise, and so just taking a couple more months because I have a really good, just Alaska's hard with doctors.
Mm-hmm.
Not a lot of resources up there, so
sure.
Moved home to New Hampshire because we have obviously Boston, Dartmouth, Portland, Maine as well, and I found some really good docs and healers and PTs, so kind of just leaning into that so I can be super healthy, but hoping to, once I'm healthy, go back to Alaska, thinking after Christmas sometime.
Dope.
Yeah.
Sick. The skiing out there kind of like skews later in the season, right?
Yeah.
Anyway.
I think what people don't realize, and I hesitate to say it because I don't want to blow up the spot, but if you're willing to be okay with 3.5 hours of lightness, like 3.5 hours of light, it's pretty amazing early season up there too. Similar to the East Coast because we also don't get a ton of light, but it's just kind of like this beautiful pastel color throughout most of the day.
Yep.
So when you're skiing in that beautiful light, everything just glows and is like, I don't know, it feels pretty magic to me. Last year, my first full winter, so my first December, January up there was record breaking. So I also got a pretty good first experience, and it just blew my mind because we were skiing chest deep POW in this like gorgeous pastel light, and there was no one around, and I was like, what is everyone doing? This is like the sickest thing.
Yeah.
And I'm jonesing for that and thinking about that a lot right now, but also know that prioritizing your health is the main priority, at least for me right now, just so that I can go back and operate fully. So God, yeah, I miss Alaska and don't really know what my future is there, but I do love those mountains.
Yeah, for sure. And when did you make the move up there?
In 2022, spring of 2022, around February, and so got to experience the full, like, March, April is kind of when it fires, when it really goes off for when film crews go up there and things start to stabilize a little bit. There's more light to work with, so that was kind of like my first intro was just like February, March, April, and that blew my mind. I got to go to Haines with MSP with Sammy Carlson and Colby Richardson and Hedvig Wessel. So that trip just like, I just moved to Alaska. We had like the sickest crew, best conditions. My like favorite segment as far as skiing goes so far, and it was just like such a magic.
Sick.
Yeah.
Was that MSP?
Yeah.
Nice.
Anywhere from here.
Yeah, cool.
So I think Alaska just like, when it hits, it really hits, you
Yeah.
know, but it's also really rugged and the weather's gnarly and it's hard to get to places and it's not easy living. Like,
Yeah.
You're 45 minutes from a grocery store where I
Yeah.
live and things like
I've read
that.
Into the Wild.
Okay.
It's
so
actually required reading in high school.
Yeah, true. I think
One
I
of
read
the
it
few
too.
books I
Actually followed through on.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
Yeah, that's a
Into the
good book.
Wild.
Yeah, I just want to go back to the event we hosted here at the Ski Monster the other night. So Kate came by the store with to host an event with Technica Blizzard. You showed a couple of films and did some Q&A. That was exciting. And then yeah, I wish more people came out, but it was a good vibe anyway.
I think it's hard on like a Wednesday night too.
For sure.
And I think people, yeah, it's hard to get the word out for
Yeah.
events, but I think it's cool to do those and hopefully continue to like build a following, because I think like we were talking about, those in-person events for me are really enjoyable, just to like, I love question and answer and see what people are interested in and what people are talking about. And yeah, I thought it was awesome.
For sure. And yeah, we've had this 10th birthday party on the calendar for a while, and I feel like a lot of people are coming out for that, so it's like hard to get people here.
Totally.
Wednesday
People are
night,
busy.
like you said. But it was super fun, and I enjoyed it.
Good.
And so you showed a few films. The one that stuck out to me was Wildflower, which is like a little different than what you've been doing with these major production companies. That's seems a little bit more personal, smaller, tight-knit crew, and all women. So
yeah, I was trying to, it wasn't necessarily planned to be all women.
Yep.
I actually had Ben Dan as a camera operator and Aaron Diamond as a guide and Gavin for support crew, because I do think the pendulum just swinging so aggressively from one side to the other, like being on a trip with all men is awesome for some reasons and like tough for other reasons. And then I've also been on the other side where it's all women, and I just like a nice mix.
Yeah.
I feel like the gender thing is like kind of exhausting, and I just like to be in the mix with people, but it ended up being just everyone I chose for their like unique skill set.
Yeah.
And it's kind of cool that Morgan McGloshin, who's my best bud, and she's also a really talented mountain guide, and she rides for Blizzard Technica as well. And as, I don't know if everyone knows, but oftentimes in the ski industry, you go on trips with people you share sponsors with. So that tends to be the tie. So I just picked someone that I really love and respect on the team, because that's kind of a helpful part when you're making content for a brand. And then Charlotte Perkle is my other best friend, and she's a filmmaker, incredibly talented editor. We met when we were both competing on the Freeride World qualifying circuit. We met in Nenda, Switzerland. She was living in Verbier, and we had a ball together. And then Ben Dan I worked with at TGR. He's super talented, really good with drones, which is an important tool in Alaska. And Aaron Diamond had spent a ton of time in a lot of the zones we were looking at, and he just had so much info and insight and experience. And then Gavin is Morgan's boyfriend and my good buddy, and he was on the Nordic team at UNH when I was there ski racing, so we've known each other since college, and it's just so cool to be at a place in my career or like mountain life or whatever it is where I have these incredible friends that are also really talented at what they do.
Yeah.
And making films in the mountains is a very special skill set. So
Yep.
it's
Absolutely.
cool. It was just all my homies, and that was the goal. Just yeah, like you said, it's a little bit different of a vibe. I've been filming with these major production companies for 6 or 7 years now, and Warren Miller, TGR, MSP, and so stoked to be involved in those crews. Like, so honored, the most talented, ski movie creators and filmers and editors there. And it's been such a cool journey, but also feeling like I'd been doing that for a while and wanted to get a bit more creative and learn other skills, right? Like just evolve, and felt like I had a meaningful story to tell for the first time. I think there's a lot of athletes creating their own content, and it's cool when you can tell that it's really meaningful to someone, the story that they're hoping to tell. And it's like getting a tattoo, like if you're really motivated and excited about this piece of art you want to put on your body, that's super rad. But if you like kind of have an idea, you don't really want to put on your body because it's forever. And I kind of feel like obviously content isn't forever like that, but when you make something and it's your passion project and it's your first one, I think it should be really meaningful. And so I finally had a storyline that I was passionate enough to put the energy into bringing to life, because it's a lot of work to make a movie, turns out.
Yep.
Yeah.
For sure. And so is that out yet?
No, we're still kind of picking away at it. We were filming when I crashed and hit my head and got hurt. So we've like the storyline in some ways, it's not a comeback story by any means, but because that experience rocked me so hard, that's actually why I moved back to North Conway, is I had to move in with my family because I hit my head so hard that I wasn't functioning like a full adult, wasn't able to like care for myself, just was getting these debilitating concussions, debilitating migraines about every 13 days. And it was hard to tell what would trigger them. Sometimes it was loud noises. Like I went to my sister's high school graduation and the clapping sent me into one. But those would last up to 10 days. And I wouldn't really be able to get out of bed or feed myself, and was just like trying to get by. And so that's why I moved home, to have a bit more support. And thankfully those have stopped. I've been migraine free for about 2 months, which feels like such a gift. Yeah. But I bring all that up because we've been kind of just documenting this experience because it's part of the story. Yeah. Wildflower itself, the original story was kind of my experience moving from Jackson to Alaska and what I was learning operating in these bigger mountains, and like the play on kind of flourishing on the big walls of AK, or blooming on the big walls of AK, is kind of the wildflower like tie-in, and just wildflowers being a play on kind of me following my heart and running with it. Yeah. It was a Hail Mary to move to Alaska.
For sure. I
knew 2 people and didn't really realize what I was getting myself into, and that drive alone was rugged. I drove up there in February, ice road trucker style. Nice. It was like -40 on some parts of the drive, and you have to bring gas because sometimes the pumps freeze. It's like 5 days.
You had to
52 hours.
Holy shit.
But I actually decided to break it up a little bit. So I took the ferry from Bellingham to Haines, which I think was actually 5 days itself, maybe 4, and then rolled into Haines and just had the most incredible experience. There's this bush pilot up there named Drake who I had connected through a buddy of mine, Sam Cohen, and I knew that I was going to Haines with MSP, and I wanted to just like scope the mountains. Mm-hmm. And I hit up Drake, and he took me out for the coolest scenic flight. We flew over all the like iconic spine walls that we've seen in movies of the past. So and it was just like, that was my first, I'd been to Alaska a bunch. I had been spending the last 5 years kind of skiing up there in the springs, but yeah, that flight just solidified that I was in the right place. And then from there, it's actually only 14 hours. But it's pretty rugged. Like you drive back through Canada. So 2 border crossings. And like I said, it was like -40 Fahrenheit, and there isn't any service. And I was like, I knew I had my inReach with me, but it wasn't in like arm's reach. And I had this realization. I was like, if I crash, like this is a bad zone. So I like got my in reach out and my sleeping bag. And I was like, whoa, Alaska's rugged.
Yeah.
And that kind of set the tone for my time there. Yeah, this past winter I learned so much. It's been really sick, but also a tough place to like try to be recovering from an injury.
Yeah.
So trying to just, that's where my home is right now. That's where my stuff is, my truck, my sled, all my gear. And I'm so excited to go back, but it also is a place that demands that you're 110%. So
yeah,
trying to just like keep in check.
Feel pretty isolated.
Yeah, it's up there.
But yeah, so I was just like, I mean, you've had an insane list of injuries just like through your career. It's a pretty long list. I can't list them all, but
yeah, I feel like I've been like kind of lucky. Ruptured my spleen when I was in 6th grade.
Nice.
That was just like stupid being a kid. We were in the ski line, like a ski rattlesnake line type deal, and we hit funny snow, and the girl behind me slammed into me, and I hit my spleen. So kind of like a child accident.
Mm-hmm.
And then in college, I blew my knee out, and then I moved to Jackson, and was pretty injury free, except a lot of slams to my head that were accumulative now, and I know that.
Yeah.
Lots of knee to face when I was learning how to jump off stuff.
Yeah.
And my thing for a while was big air, so impact is just intense, and I'm learning that everything they say is true about the body keeping score.
Yep.
And concussions and impact, taking a toll on you. And I had, when I was filming with TGR and Make Believe, I tomahawked out of Gothic and broke my tibial plateau, but didn't have to get any surgery. And then impact injuries, dude, like disc stuff with my back. So like in the big scheme of things, I feel, I'm going to knock on wood real quick, feel very lucky that for what I was doing, man, like I look back now and I'm like, oh, you got out of it pretty good. Some of those crashes I took, especially since spending time in Alaska, were just so full on. Right. And to walk away from those, like my nervous system took a hit, and I know that now. But I just feel, I look back and I'm like, what a gnarly sport.
Yeah, definitely.
Worth it, like no regrets, but definitely grateful to have my body feeling good right now and be in one piece, because that's like longevity is turn 30 in March now. That's what I'm thinking about.
And so can you just talk about how it's been different recovering from a head injury, from these like impact injuries, bones, ligaments?
Yeah, heads and nervous systems are just so different, because if you blow out your knee or whatever, a physical injury, there's usually like a pretty normal trajectory of recovery, in that you might have to get surgery, and then after X amount of months you can start doing this PT, and there's just like this systematic approach. And bones and muscles and tendons seem person to person to be somewhat similar. Yeah. And brains are just, each brain is so uniquely different. So it's a lot of unknowns, and it's a lot of trial and error, and there's not as much, there's a ton of research coming out right now. Yeah. And I'm so thankful to be in a time with access to information and a lot of emphasis, especially through football and rugby and these other high impact sports that have maybe a bit more funding. There's a lot of research coming out. And I just feel really grateful for that, because it's an absolute nest to sort through. It took me about 5 or 6 months to even get to a place where I understood that how my migraines were working, right? Yeah. Like I was diagnosed with what they call traumatic migraines. And so I shook up my thalamus and parts of my brain so much in these 2 crashes I recently took in March, that my thalamus was just on high alert. So now I understand that those loud noises or the bright lights or the stressful situations was just enough input that my brain was like, nope, we're in danger. How do we make her stop? And how it made me stop was these debilitating 5 to 10 day migraines where I couldn't get out of bed. Yeah. And I look back now and I see that my body was trying to give me signs that it needed a break for years. And I didn't listen to the whispers, and I didn't listen to the polite asks, and now my body's screaming, and I get that. I've asked a lot of my body. I think the reality that I understand now and the style of skiing I was doing, and it's such a privileged, beautiful opportunity to experience this, but when you're heli skiing, your brain is getting such insane dopamine hits, and like brain chemistry is going nuts when you're in a helicopter for 12. So overstimulation, simulated. Like, so many loud noises on the helicopter, so much stress, real stress, like life or death stress.
Right.
With the skiing that I'm doing and the avalanche terrain I'm operating in and the ways that I'm choosing to ski this terrain and the places that I'm operating in are no fall zones. And then to have the stress of like spending a lot of money to be out there and the stress of, to be totally honest, like sometimes I'm the only girl on trips and wanting to make sure that I'm doing a good job of representing women and like these weird stresses that are oftentimes internal, but also real stresses that the brain is just taken in. And that's can be, 10 hours a day for 2 weeks straight if the weather's good.
Yeah.
And I'd go after those trips, I'd go into these massive depressions, these massive come downs. We call them re-entries. Like I always check on the homies about 2 weeks after a trip and just see how they're doing. Cause we all have these like 2 week intense, just brain chemistry binges really. And then the brain is just so depleted and the come down's quite intense. And I'm a bit more susceptible to brain chemistry stuff. I've been struggling with depression since I was a kid. Really high highs, really low lows. I think it's, you have to be hardwired a little differently to do what I do and to operate in the way that I operate and to really enjoy it and want to keep doing it. And so I think that comes with other issues and just learning how to manage that for myself. And that's kind of what Wildflower is about, is not so much walking away from these things that I love, but understanding that they do have an impact on me, that I'm not invincible, and that there are healthier ways to approach this. Like the industry is like pretty famous for going and having these insane days in the mountains and then coming home and celebrating those insane days in the mountains with like partying and maybe not sleeping and definitely not yoga and meditation, like definitely nothing like that. So in my time in Jackson, when I was jumping off of stuff and skiing with TGR and it was punk rock and it was so sick and I felt so cool and it was awesome, like had so much fun. And I think that's your early 20s too. But now I notice that my body's willing to do one, but not both.
Right.
So I can go out and have these rad times in the mountains and really explore those growth edges in a way that I want, but have to come home and give my body some love and some recovery time. And it might be a couple days off, like it looks so different. And just listening to my body and what it needs now, because the screaming is intense. And so if I can learn to have the body whisper again and really zone into those subtle signs, it feels like that's my way forward right now.
Yeah. And I haven't really, I don't think I've ever even said this on the podcast, but I suffered a traumatic brain injury skiing.
Damn.
When I was like 13.
Okay.
So that's why I'm interested in this topic, and I think it's so important.
What was your recovery like?
Insanely lucky.
Yeah.
Like super rough at first. When I first woke up, I couldn't walk, I couldn't talk. I could just kind of like make sounds, and it was looking grim. And then shortly after first waking up, I had another long sleep for like it was almost a full day. And the way my parents have described it is before that second long sleep and after, it was like someone flipped a switch. Like I was still in really rough shape, but it went from no hope, really grim, to hopeful real quick. And then I got transferred down to Boston. I stayed here for inpatient rehab for like a couple weeks or a week or two or something. And then after that, I went home and was just doing outpatient rehab. So my mom would bring me to physical therapy, speech therapy, occupational therapy. And those months were when I like first started really coming back.
Damn.
I'm like very familiar with like the different effects of brain injuries on people. Like the impact can be just as hard and the recovery can be completely different for two different people. And I lost my train of thought. This is the brain injury kicking in.
Well, I think that's the crazy part, is it does have these effects on us that like we can be mostly good, but there's 10 or 20% of life right now for me that's still very different than before I hit my head. Mm-hmm. And like you said, like we're athletic and we're young. And so like my balance is really good and so I go to these concussion clinics and they're like, your balance is pretty good. I'm like, but it used to be better.
Yeah.
Or like these like little things that are a little different, or going and socializing. And if I'm trying to talk with someone and there's loud music in the background, I totally lose my train of thought. Or if I get like flustered, I lose my train of thought. And it's like these little things that, because I look totally fine on the outside, these invisible injuries you just don't even know. And I wouldn't have known if you hadn't told me that you had had a TBI. And these are things I think that are important to talk about because it's invisible. And if I showed up at, you know, like to go film a segment and I had just recovered from a knee injury, people would understand what that meant. I have a brace on, so they can see that, or I can explain that to them and they can understand that maybe that segment I won't push so hard because I'm recovering. But when you can't see it and it's in my brain and my nervous system is still kind of trying to regulate itself, like I've really struggled to regulate my nervous system since hitting my head. And that's one of the parts of concussions that no one talks about is, yes, there's headaches. Yes, there's sensitivity to light. Yes, there's all of these things that we've heard in the media, but there's also these really crazy things because when you hit your head, your brainstem basically shuts down. And so the communication between your nervous system and your brain is faulty. And it's like, you can rewire that and you can get it back. But when you hit your head, because your brain is the control for everything else in your body, it can throw everything for a loop. So my hormones are out of whack and we're working on it. My neurotransmitters, my dopamine and serotonin and my upper type transmitters are actually quite healthy, which is interesting, but cool. And then those that help me regulate and come down and chill are completely depleted. And so I'm just working through these things that take months and months to bounce back because I hit my head so hard that things got physically jostled. And kind of learning that there's so many more symptoms that people don't talk about. And I've had a lot of male skier buddies reach out, or I've shared kind of something with them catching up or whatever. And they're like, oh yeah, dude, like I've been there. Like just, I'll keep him anonymous because I would like to ask him if I could say this, but I was talking to him and he was on the Freeride World Tour at one point and now he's a patroller. And he was just like, dude, like the thing about that head injury, or my head injury, speaking to his, that really threw him for a loop was the mental health struggles that came along with it. He said the social anxiety was crippling and the depression was intense, and he didn't know how to talk about it because it was new to him. And I've been talking about mental health for a long time because it's something that is close to my heart because I've struggled with it, and it's a way that I've seen that my platform is helpful. And I'm trying to like have these things come up organically. And if someone on a podcast asks me about it, I'm psyched to dive in. Or if someone knows or listen to a podcast and reach out to me about mental health, it's just very easy for me to access that because I've been dealing with it for a long time, but it wasn't easy to get there. So I think it's easier for me to talk about the mental health symptoms associated with my concussion because I recognize them as mental health issues, where if you just hit your head and you've never had depression or anxiety, it's like such a trip to now be operating with that. And those, I think, are also symptoms that people don't know are even associated with the concussion. So they're like, maybe I'm just depressed because I'm not doing my sport, or maybe I'm just depressed because socializing is harder, and that is also a byproduct. So it's just a messy, messy web that I could talk about for days because I've just been obsessing about it. Yeah,
for sure. And I think, a big battle for me with my head injury has been like the unknown.
Exactly.
Like, what is my full potential, and am I capable of reaching it now? Mm-hmm. And that's like been my main battle. But I think from in the context of being an athlete, it gets really hard like coming back from that, because like there's a little bit of that uncertainty of what your full potential is, and also like a little bit of like guilt, like should I be doing this?
Totally, dude. Yeah. No, I'm grateful you brought that up because that's something I've actually really been struggling with. I think a lot of people understand concussions through, like I said, unless you've had a TBI or know someone who has, I think there's a lot of misunderstanding about concussions. There's also a lot of mixed research, and like we're starting to learn more about them. So I think we initially thought one thing and now we're learning that another thing might be true. And one of those things that I'm thinking of right now is that there's a lot of thought that like if you hit your head a bunch, you get to a point where you can't hit your head again or you'll go brain dead type of deal.
Mm-hmm.
And that was my fear with this, because that was wherever I picked up that information, and maybe I'm just speaking out of my bias and other people are like, I've never thought that, but that was kind of something I was like, am I at this point? Because I've had people in my life give up sport because they're like, I just can't hit my head anymore. So in my mind, I'm like, am I at that place? And I'm really grateful that I'm not. And I've asked the doctor straight up, like, if I go back to sport, is that irresponsible? Like, if I hit my head again, will there be irreversible damage? And the beautiful thing about the human body is how incredibly capable it is of healing itself. And the understanding I have now is if I heal this fully and I give my brain all it needs and I don't go out of my way to hit my head, like the reality of life is just dangerous. We can't wrap ourselves in bubble wrap. If I get into a car accident, that's just as dangerous as crashing free riding.
Right.
But I have more control over the free ride crashing. And so as I return to sport, there's definitely a part of me that has that, is this stupid? Is this selfish? Is this my ego? But after talking to the doctors, I realized that I'm going to be okay. I'm going to recover 100%. My brain certainly has taken some impacts, but because I'm doing the work that I'm doing now with the cognitive work and the vision therapy, and I'm helping these patterns get back online, I'm going to be okay. If you get these hits and you don't do that work and you don't help the patterns come back, that's when you have to worry about things down the line. And again, I'm not expert on this by any stretch of the imagination. This is just how it's been explained to me and how I understand it in my specific situation.
Yeah.
And every brain is different. And I have gotten a bunch of brain scans and I have a very deep understanding of my brain at this point through the help of so many incredible doctors. And so that's my unique experience. And my hope is that I can get to be 100% so that when I go in the mountains, I am not, I can't be in the mountains operating at 80%,
Right.
With my brain. So it's imperative to me that I heal 100% before I re-enter the mountains, because that's the safest way. I think if you rush something like this and you go back to the mountains at 75%, which I've certainly done before,
Yep.
you're going to crash because you're just not on, And so that's kind of where I'm at with that. But I also, I've thought about, like, do I put out a post and share that? Like, do I put out a post and share that, like, I'm not being irresponsible, that I see the risks and that I believe that I can mitigate the risks? And that's a conversation I've been having with myself of, like, do I go back to heli skiing? And I don't think this year. I don't think I go back to heli skiing this year in that way. I think if I got the opportunity to go and do a little bit of heli skiing with some friends, or did a competition where there was helicopter access and it wasn't the really hard-hitting 2-week segment where you're just doing 12 runs a day and really high consequence terrain and, pushing it 100% for 2 weeks, like that sustained.
Yeah.
I don't want to do that this year.
Right.
I can do little bits. I think that's what I'm learning, is it's baby steps for me. I go and for instance, I go to the gym and I push. Do I get any symptoms from that? I kind of take a couple days and I listen to my body. And if I didn't, I can go and push again. But I'm just in this really strange place where I have to go and kind of slowly figure out what my body's willing to take on. But there certainly is that shame and that guilt. And there is a complication of, this is how I make my money.
Yeah.
Like, skiing is my full-time job, and it's been my full-time job for a long time.
Yep.
Super lucky to go to Proctor Academy, super lucky to chase skiing and get a year at UNH, but I don't have a college degree.
Right.
I put everything into skiing, and I think a lot of athletes do that, and then you get to a certain place and you're like, ooh, okay, what's next? I do rely on my body. That's scary when your body starts to scream, and in some ways I thought my body was failing, and my body in some ways kind of was, because I pushed it so hard.
Yeah.
It was shutting down. I was in aggressive adrenal fatigue.
Yep.
I had asked way too much of my body, and I think that's why this has all been really extra scary, because I have contracts to sign, and it's important to stay relevant, and it's important to continue forward as an athlete, and trying to find a way to do that, not just because I make money, but also because it's who I am.
Yep.
And it's what I love to do. And I'm a different person without skiing. So I think that's what I've been trying to focus on, is like, a lot of people are like, you have so many skills, you can step away, you could go get guiding certs, you could be a guide, you could work in the ski industry, you've got contacts, like, and I'm grateful for those opportunities, but those don't fire me up and light me up about continuing to explore in the mountains. And I think there's ways to continue to push myself and evolve as a skier that doesn't have as much high impact. I think more human-powered access skiing, more expedition-based, where I'm going deeper, exploring deeper. And so you're not taking as much risk on the mountains because you don't have a helicopter right there to save you. You don't have the resources that heli skiing is this really unique opportunity when you're filming skiing because you can push as hard as you want and it's celebrated to do so because if something happens, you can get out of there in 5 minutes, you know?
Yeah.
So when you're going on these more like, you know, expedition style trips or deeper trips, like I was flirting with on the wildflower trip, just understanding what it means to go winter camping and what it means to be self-reliant and self-sufficient in the mountains. And that really fires me up. And it's a slower pace and it's really dangerous to on-site terrain with a helicopter.
Yeah.
You don't get to touch the snow until you're full throttle giving her. And I think there's, as I recover from this concussion, just slowing it down and really feeling the snow and understanding what I'm getting myself into and putting more time on the terrain and with the mountains, it seems to be what feels safest right now. So I'm not going to like sprint back to going on the gnarliest trip I can.
Yeah.
You know, that's
well,
not
good
the
for
goal.
you.
But that's kind of been a very, it's been a bit of a mind trip thinking like, am I blind? Like, am I in a blind spot here? Like, is this crazy to go back to it? But then, you know, you see people like Lindsey Vonn coming out of retirement at 40 after a knee replacement. You're like, all right, maybe we just are just psychos and can't get enough.
Yeah. Yeah. Lindsey Vonn's a beast.
She's a
Learned
beast.
the Times yesterday.
Built different, man.
But going back, so I credit to you for not pushing it. And like, it sounds like you're taking a pretty smart approach to this whole recovery thing and learning a lot, which is important. I like look back to, so what happened to me was I was 13 years old. I was a pretty good freestyle skier. I was pushing it way too hard in a competition. I tried a trick I'd never done. Hit my head, seizure, fell into a coma. It was at Whaleback.
Okay.
So it's right down the road from Dartmouth, which is super lucky.
Yeah.
No airlift or anything. And to go back to my recovery, like I got pretty lucky, all things considered. And like, as soon as I feel like I have a pretty unique experience because I was 13 years old, so I wasn't mature at all. And I was like, all I wanted to do was be a pro skier. Yeah. Like all I wanted to do was be a pro skier. And obviously like as I recovered more and could like have these introspective thoughts and like all this stuff, I was like, of course I'm not going to push it as hard on skis as I used to. Like the dream's up. Like I'm not going to be a pro skier. But still looking back at it, like I feel some of that guilt in regard to like some of the things I did on skis after. I still was in the park. I was still like trying to do shit, get shots. And I think a reason for like getting back on skis and pushing it is I felt like I had something to prove. Like I was this really good skier and I was going to be really good and I still can be really good. Totally. And, I have a little bit of that like guilt where like I look back at some of the things I did and I'm like, why did I do that? Like it was like, I feel like it was like ego driven.
Totally, dude. But also you were so young, you know, like, and I kind of applaud that in some ways that you probably recovered the way that you did because you believed in yourself. Like I've gone to some concussion clinics now, so I have a community of people who are recovering. And I would say the thing that gets in the way of people's ability to recover, it seems, is not believing that they can be where they were trying to go before. And so like, I understand that guilt and I think that's good introspection. Like we should always kind of take some inventory on ourselves, right? But I think I would urge you that could have like maybe applaud that behavior because that could have really helped. And you were a kid. I think I know that desire to be a pro skier. It burns so strong. And it's like to have a dream is so important and so rad. And at that age, so young, to in some ways have it taken away from you. Like, that's a hard pill to swallow.
Mm-hmm.
And to, like you said, to not be mature and to not have the coping mechanisms that we have now.
Right.
To understand that there are so many other possibilities. That's what you wanted.
Yeah.
And when you're, I don't know, I can only speak to my experience, but when you're a kid and you have a dream like that, just blinders are on.
Yeah.
You don't think about like, oh, I could go into finance and make way more money. I could be a doctor. I could be a lawyer.
Yeah.
I could, and like, who cares, right? Like, that's what you wanted. And so I hear you, but I also think that that probably in some ways served you. Because I think that fire is like, recovering from something like this is gnarly. And honestly, like, I've gotten into some Joe Dispenza, quantum physics, woo-woo of like the power of the mind. And I think when we're young, like, just believing like, oh yeah, I'm going to get back, I'm going to do it. It's like, yeah, maybe that's kind of what allowed you to keep charging forward and to recover so quickly.
Mm-hmm.
But the, like, some of the stuff that you brought up is also partially true, right? About the ego. And that's the stuff I'm really trying to examine, because I've been there and I've lived that dream. Can I let that go?
Right.
Like, am I holding on to it because it's my identity? Am I hanging on to it because I still have something to prove? You know, like, those are good questions to ask. And I'm sure the answer to some of those are, yeah.
Yeah.
And I think life is like really tricky because the pendulum swing is so aggressive. It's like really hard to find that balance. It's like, chase your dream 1,000%, put everything on the line to feel alive, blah, 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 blah. Quit completely. Mm-hmm. And I think I can hopefully find a balance because I'm now 30 and go to a bunch of therapy and have tools that I didn't have when I was 25.
Yeah.
Through these life experiences and through injury. And I know you probably understand that injuries are like such a learning experience. Mm-hmm. And without yours, you would be a totally different person. And it's hard to say if that you would be a better person or a worse person. And I don't think it needs to be that way. I think you're just a different person and you're who you're supposed to be. And I think I feel definitely different after hitting my head. Mm-hmm. I'm a little bit more introverted and a little bit more like out there in a way that's probably how I always should have been, but was quite good at like masking and fitting into the status quo and what I thought people wanted for me. And hitting my head has kind of been like, one, life is short. I could have died. I'm so grateful to still be good. And two, my head works a little bit differently. And now I have to like be okay with that.
Yeah.
You know,
you're quirkier.
I'm quirkier, which honestly, I dig it. You know, it's boring if everyone's just like normal and robotic.
Yeah. Right. And I'm sorry to go on a tangent about myself.
No, I'm so glad you did.
I think it like helps position all this.
Yeah. And it's so important to know that other people have had these experiences too. Right. Like, people are like, big mountain skiing is such a dangerous sport. Like, of course you've hit your head. And it's like you said, as kids, we hit our head. I got knocked out in gym class playing volleyball in 6th grade. That wasn't like chasing an ego dream. That's just life. Yeah. You know, there's a lot of impact. You can be at high altitude or like just be in Colorado visiting your family and faint because you're not used to altitude and hit your head, right? Right. So I appreciate you sharing. And I know it's hard to share those things, but I do think it's cool because ultimately, like, being vulnerable and sharing your experience allows me to, like, now I know more about you and can understand you and how you show up in the world and that you've been through something, you know, like, I feel like when I hear about people's, like, hurdles they've overcome, it just, like, makes me like them even more. You know? Yeah. Like, hell yeah, dude. For sure. Good on you for persevering and continuing to, like, stay in the ski industry and chase that love for something, because not everyone can say that. I'm just chasing something. Me too, man. I mean, that's the point, right? Just keep, like, obviously it's nice to be at peace and to, like, have everything you need, but it's a big world out there. It's fun to chase, fun to explore, fun to see what's out there. And, you know, I don't know, there's some saying that I'm going to butcher, but like something like a boat wasn't built to sit in the harbor. You know? It's true. Just, yeah, again, you can't wrap yourself in bubble wrap. Keep ripping. Yep. Hell yeah. And cool. So, like, talking about your actual skiing. Yeah. What's, like, the approach now? The plan. The plan is kind of rough. The plan is go and feel it out. Yep. The plan is to not overextend myself with trips and with work this winter, and I'm so grateful that my sponsors are on board for that. I think it's important to recognize that I am supported by my sponsors, and there isn't pressure from them to get back as fast as possible. Like, we've, with the North Face, with Blizzard, with Scott, especially also 10 Barrel, who I ride for, we've had these serious conversations about the reality of recovering from a TBI, and that this is 1 year in the rest of my life. And they respect me and appreciate me and love me enough to give me that space to recover and to understand that at the end of the day, my job certainly is to be a skier and to do rad things and to represent the brand, but that my brain and my future is more important than that. And it feels so good to hear that. I think it's easy for me to put pressure on myself to get back, but when you have the brands that you ride for kind of remind you what's important too, that's really helpful.
Yeah.
So gonna just take it easy, gonna go probably to Europe with some friends early season and just go have fun and get turns under me and maybe play around with flying my paraglider a little bit. I haven't been flying since my head injury because I've been trying to be as safe as possible and not mess my nervous system, but just kind of see how things are feeling. And I think speed riding in the future could be something that I dabble in a way that's not like the Red Bull boys that are close proximity flying.
Is that a paragliding thing?
Yeah, it's like a 6 meter or a smaller wing overhead with skis on. And it's something I've been doing here and there for a couple of years and keeping it kind of quiet and not wanting to like push that sport for filming or for my career, but that's a way that I can see I can evolve as an athlete. And to be totally honest, with climate change, heli skiing and that style of big mountain skiing is getting harder and harder to nail.
Yeah.
Snow conditions to jump off big cliffs have to be quite specific.
Yep.
So just finding ways that are lower impact and that I can be a beginner at. And I'm at a point in my skiing with big mountain skiing where when I push just the slightest bit, I'm pushing into like this really gnarly level of risk. Like I've gotten so dialed in my world and to a point with my skiing where I'm just getting incremental changes in my skiing. Yeah. And it's nice to be a beginner in something or an intermediate and have these huge leaps of evolution.
The rapid progression is great to feel with a new thing.
And it's good for me to still stimulate my brain. Like I'm an EMT and I've been going into this continued education solo wilderness school as a school that teaches wilderness first aid and first responder and EMT in North Conway. And I kind of pop in there from time to time just to like, keep my brain going. Sick. So I see speed riding as a way to like do something different and not have to feel like I'm a professional and the best at it and just go have fun, man. Like I've been working really hard and my job is fun. So I understand it's confusing, but it's still my job. Yep. And I've been pushing really hard and I want to just go and love skiing and enjoy skiing. And I have the space for my sponsors to take a year and do that. So I'm certainly going to.
That's great.
Yeah.
Shout out to the sponsors.
Shout out to the sponsors. Honestly.
You earned it.
So thank you. It's been so nice to have their support because there's a lot of, the energy is like, you feel like you need to prove something even when you ride for the North Face or have been a pro skier for 10 years or whatever. There's still like this weird rat race desire to stay relevant. And sometimes you need permission for someone else to take a breather. So easing back into it and just feeling grateful that my body and mind are capable of getting back in the mountains, period, and not taking that for granted.
Yeah. Hell yeah. Shout out to sponsors.
Amen.
And yeah, that's really cool for them to like, I mean, I think it's dangerous. I think the pressure to make sponsors happy and put out good content can lead to people not letting their bodies heal. Totally. And I think like athletes in every sport have a lot of internal pressure too. And that's kind of what we just talked about. It's like,
I mean, you have to be
something to prove.
Kind of a type A person to get to a certain level in sport. And I talk about that in a little bit in the film, but where do those motivations come from? You know? And I think I look around at the athletes that I'm surrounded by and these high level athletes and they all have some demons for sure. And that doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad thing to have demons, but we all have internal motivators and it's up to us if we let them push us to a dangerous level of motivation or if we use those little fires to allow us to do incredible things. So it's a fine line, but I think it is dangerous and I think it's cool for the industry to understand that yes, we're athletes, but we're also human and we're going to have lives after we retire and that they see the importance of us still being able to go skiing with our grandkids or whatever that might be. So, and that took me I'm 30 now. I wasn't thinking this way when I was 20 at all.
Yeah.
So, I I don't know, different stages, but grateful to be where I'm at and to have the opportunities I still have and see where that takes me. I have no idea, man. It's one foot in front of the other, and that's scary, but also exciting.
Hell yeah. And just a quick question. This is more for me.
Okay.
Have you done EMDR?
I have done EMDR.
Same.
Yeah.
That's a type of processing that they do in therapy, or I'm just trying to explain to people who might not know.
I don't even know how to explain it.
But it's eye movement, EMDR, eye movement desensitization reprocessing.
Okay.
And I've done it quite a bit, and like I've been getting like more and more into therapy the last like 5 years.
Hell yeah. Shout out to therapy.
Shout out to therapy. I'm not afraid to admit it.
My dog.
But it's like, I realize that there's some unresolved issues I need to address, and I've been doing EMDR, and it's been helping a lot. It's fucking crazy. It's crazy. Like, it feels weird, and the things that I'm able to get out of it are like mind blowing.
Cool. That's so rad to hear. I haven't used it with this recovery. I've used it with some like old stuff, trying to get rid of old stuff, but it's cool to hear your experience, because I think sometimes you have to be in the right place for it to really work, right? Like you have to be in the right place and like want to show up and want to do the work. And when I was doing it, I think I was showing up because I was struggling and I didn't really like want to take it on.
Yep.
But I'm so glad you found a modality that works, because it is crazy when you feel that. And it's like talk therapy is one thing, but when you really feel like a difference, and you can let go some of that deep
I'm like
stuff.
never in the mood to do it, and then like if I lock in, I usually get something out of it. Hell yeah, therapy's sick.
It is sick. I think it's so cool that people are like not afraid to talk about it, because we're all, I don't know, why wouldn't you want to be a better version of yourself?
Right.
And I think the reality that I see now, because this head injury has shook me up so much that I actually see things differently. For a while, I didn't feel like myself, and so I was looking through. It was basically like getting my bias shook up, which is so healthy, because we're like raised a certain way, and our parents gave us these views, and then where we got educated gave us these views, and obviously all these other things that gave us our views and our experience, like gender and race, etc. And I feel like to have the opportunity to go to therapy or to have an experience where you pull back some layers and you're like, I've always seen it that way, but why? And it allows, I think, just humans to connect and to understand each other more, because, it's really easy to just close down, and be a grump and see things a certain way. And it's nice to just like be like, oh, maybe my way isn't always the right way, and there's other ways of looking at it. And I think the more time people can do that, it's healthier, like especially in the ski industry. There's an old guard that's hanging on to a certain mentality, and like I'm so grateful we're having the conversations about that our bodies are important to take care of, that therapy is cool. Like the fact that this is what we're talking about on a ski podcast really shows me that there's been evolution, and I think that's so beautiful, because I look back on other times like of the industry, like in the 90s, where it was so rad, and like honestly the ideal time to be a pro skier in my mind, like
rock star
and so rad, but also like a lot of unhealthy practices, and not as great of a place and not as inclusive of a place to be a woman or a person of color, or less helmets, totally,
more drugs,
so
less helmets.
How are they doing now? Go check out that generation. I worry sometimes, like, I don't know, a lot of undiagnosed concussions in that realm.
For sure.
Just hope everyone's taking care of themselves out there and taking it easy on the boozing and getting a good night's sleep. That seems to be a good equation. Love a good cocktail or a beer every now and then again. But crazy what that does to the brain after a brain hit. So
Have you stopped drinking since?
I have. Yeah. It's been weird, because I'm not like I'm a sober person at all. But I just noticed my brain doesn't function as well.
It's so much healthier. Like, it's insane how much better you feel.
And that's retraining and rewiring. Like going to the movie premiere last night and not drinking, it still feels weird. Yeah,
for sure.
Really, obviously, like it's way more accepted to not drink, and there's NA beers, and it's like easier for sure. But still weird, It's like I was a pro skier trying to recreate the rock star era in my mind, because that's what I was attracted to. I remember watching TGR movies when I first moved to Jackson, and like then going to a premiere and seeing Angel and Johnny and Nick McNutt and Ian and Sage and all the boys just like ripping and being like, that's the coolest, like they're so cool. And I'm sure I romanticized it in my head. And was just like wanting that. And now I'm like, oh, this is so cool that like I went to this ski movie, I like did this thing, but I also woke up this morning feeling good and was able to like do my morning routine, which is longer than normal now because I have a bunch that I'm doing with breath work and meditation to keep my brain online. But just, I don't know, life requires a lot of discipline right now to keep my brain operating so I can have conversations with you. And I'm just prioritizing those things. But I don't think partying is totally bad. I think it's so healthy to go and like dance and just let your hair down from time to time.
Absolutely. Sorry.
Life is too hard. So don't be afraid to let her buck, but also the other things are good to keep in check too.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Hell yeah. Trying to think if I have anything else. But I appreciate you sharing all this stuff and listening to my story.
Totally.
And I had one more thing to say. Oh yeah. You did kind of experience the rock star thing with back-to-back Corbets, Queen of Corbets.
I 100% felt like a rock star there for a couple years.
For sure.
And it was so fun. And I think I'm able to move on from that because I experienced it. Mm-hmm. I'm not chasing that anymore because I got to live it and it was awesome. Yeah. And I wouldn't change a thing. Mm-hmm. I'm so grateful for my time at TGR. I'm so grateful for the opportunities to film with Scott Gaffney and MSP, and hope that's not over. And like my first Warren Miller segment, I also felt like a rock star. I went on tour for like a month around New England, and to be an East Coast kid on tour with Warren Miller, just going from like places like New York to, New York City, I was like having a ball, and there's huge crowds, and I was partying, signing posters, signing bodies, boobs and butts. It was the best. So yeah, I definitely, you're right. And it's important to remind myself that those were good times and wouldn't change a thing. So thank you, skiing, for an absolute rowdy couple. Like my 20s were so fun.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. Sick. All right.
And thank you so much. I'm so grateful you asked like really insightful questions that I love to talk about, and I could talk about side cut and skis all day too, but I love talking about the human side of skiing. Yeah.
But yeah, thank you so much, Kate.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening, everybody.
Later.